Hello everyone, Kasim Khan is here. Please subscribe my channel and press bell button for more updates. So guys, in part 2 of interest rate, we will learn about factor affecting on cost of money I. So what are the factor which affect the cost of money? So there are two main factors which affect on the cost of money. One is the fundamental factor, and the second one is the macroeconomic factor affecting cost of money. So first we will discuss about the fundamental factor which affect the cost of money largely. The four most fundamental factor affecting the cost of money are the first one is the production opportunities. So production opportunities are with the perspective of funds. So how the production opportunities affect the cost of money? If the economy have a good if economy is in a good position and there is a very positive investment opportunities for for the organization, for the companies, and there is a very favorable investment there is a if there is a very favorable business environment for the organizations. So the organization will start new projects, new investment, and their production will increase with the time, and their investment opportunities grow. So when there is a very positive production opportunities exist in the economy, at that time the companies start new projects. So when they start new investments and new projects, they need more funds. At that time, demand of funds will increase. When the demand of funds will increase, their interest rate automatically will increase. So how production opportunities affect the cost of money? Rate of return that producer expect to earn on invested capital. So obviously, if there is a positive expected rate of return in near future, so at that time companies start new investment projects. So when your production opportunities will increase, your demand for funds increases. So at that time, your interest rate will also increases. So in the second most important fundamental factor, that is time preference for the consumption. So the preferences of consumer for current consumption as opposed to the saving for the future consumption. So there are the different like consumption patterns of the investor in the society. If their consumption patterns have been like changed, delayed, let's suppose if their preference for current consumption, if their current consumption preferences and the pattern increases, ultimately their demand for their they have a less money for the saving. Their saving volume will decreases. When their saving volume decreases, obviously their supply of funds will decrease. So when the supply of funds will decreases, ultimately your interest rate will increases. So the pattern behavior, the consumption behavior, and the pattern of consumption have a large effect in determination of the interest rate. So riskiness of loan, the chance that an investment will provide a low or negative return. Uh, there is a direct relation between risk and return. If there is a high risk, people expect they will get high return, and when they will get high return, they will take more loans. They need more funds to invest in high risky project. So when there is a high risky project, there when there is a high risk, there will be high expected ROR, and at that time your interest will increases. So for high risky loans, investor expect high rate of return. So at that time, demand of funds increases, that ultimately affect positive give a positive effect on high interest. So what is inflation? How the inflation is determined the cost of money. So the amount by which prices increases over the time period. So obviously, when there is a high inflation, there is a high demand of money. The people need more money to purchase the products. The people have a more, and the companies have need a more money to buy the raw material, the inputs for production. So a high inflation gives you high demand of funds. Ultimately, your interest will also increase. Secondly, when there is a high inflation, lender will expect high rate of return from the on their investment. Ultimately, your interest rate will increase. So it was all about how the fundamental factors affect your cost of money and how your interest rate changes with the perspective of these fundamental factors. So in macroeconomic factors affecting cost of money, how your macroeconomic factor affecting. In first one is the monetary policy tool, and monetary policy tools used by your state bank of the country, like your in Pakistan, State Bank of the Pakistan is the central bank, same like Bank of India. So these are the central bank, and most of the time monetary tools used by the central bank of your country, like Federal Reserve policy. We will discuss in next slide. Open market operations, and the second one is business boom. The third is business recession, and the fourth microeconomic factor is government budget deficit and surplus. So, how the Federal Reserve policy effects on the cost of money. So an increase in required reserve ratio by central bank means reduction in volume of deposit, which raises interest rate. So first you need to understand what is reserve policy. Reserve policy is basically every bank need to maintain deposit level as a reserve ratio in central bank for the any kind of future like uncertainty. So if the central bank increases reserve ratio of the private banks, ultimately it will affect negatively, ultimately affect positively on the interest rate. If there is a high reserve ratio, ultimately supply of funds in the general market will decrease by the bank, and in this response interest rate will increase. When there is a reserve ratio increased by the central bank for the private banks, ultimately because private banks provide money in the general market, in the open market, that time supply of funds will increase because banks need to reserve more deposits in the reserve ratio to maintain the reserve ratio set by the central bank. So supply of fund will decrease and ultimately your interest rate will increase. So a decrease in required reserve ratio means availability of excess deposit will decrease interest rate. So if let's suppose required reserve ratio decreases by the central bank from 15% to 10%, then ultimately that 5% extra money will be available in the general market for financing. At that time, supply of funds will increases. So when supply of funds increases, ultimately it affects negatively on the interest rate. And if reserve ratio will decreases, supply of funds will increases, and the interest rate will decrease. So how the second one is the open market operation. How the open market operation, how central bank use this tool to control the cost of money. Central banks buys back securities from open market, thus injecting money into the system, increasing supply of money, which decreases the interest rate. Sometimes there is a recession in the economy and people have no money. They have good ideas, but they have no money at that time. People, central bank collect the securities back and they buy back the securities. With this method, money is injected in the economy, money is supplied in the economy, but the notes, you can say that security paper has been buy back by the central bank. So with this method, central bank increase the supply of money in the society, and this way the interest rate decreases because when supply of the funds increases, at that time interest rate decreases. So in the reverse operation, central bank sells securities into the open market, thus absorb money from the system, decreasing supply of money with increasing interest rates. Let's suppose if there is a high inflation in the society and the central bank want to minimize the volume of the funds in the society, in the system. So at that time, a central bank issues the securities in the open market. With this method, people have securities and the cash move back to the central bank. and this way systematically your floating cash decrease in your society, and ultimately when there is a less availability of funds in the society, interest rates increases at that time. So with this open market tool operation, with this tool, central bank also can control the cost of money and also demand and supply of money as well in the system. So how the business move effect on the cost of money, increased demand of funds. Obviously, when there is a high business move, what is a business move? When there is a very positive and favorable business environment for the companies and the investor, at that time, your rate of return are in moving in positive direction, in positive figures and the numbers. At that time everyone need to invest, everyone interested to invest the money in some kind of project. So at that time increase demand of fund increases, that ultimately your inflation pressure will also increases and interest rate also increases. So what is business recession? When the business when the economy when the environment is not favorable for the businessman and for the organization and for the businesses as well. At that time people are reluctant to invest in new projects and in new investment plan. At that time your decreased demand of funds, your funds demand decreases, your inflationary pressure is also decreases. Ultimately your interest is also decreases because no one is interested to invest in the funds. They have no need of money, no one is interested to borrow the money from someone. So at that time your interest rate decreases. Government budget deficit. You know, government is also a big borrower of the funds. So government needs funds, which means demand for funds. If government have a budget deficit, they need funds to finance the public projects. At that time, government will borrow the money from general market, and ultimately it will give a positive pressure on in booming of interest. Your interest rate will increases because the demand of fund will increases. So government budget surplus, if the government have extra money more than to invest in the public projects, at that time government will not need so much cash to finance for the public projects. At that time ultimately it affect negatively on the interest rate. So what are the interest rate levels? Capital is allocated to borrower according to interest rate. Most capital across the world is allocated to the price system, that is interest rate. So this we all learned in the previous slides. So with the price system, you determine the interest rate in the world, and you determine the cost of money. As can be seen in the figure below, the excess funds of lender are allocated to the borrower through a price system, that is interest rate. So with the help of this price system, with the help of demand and supply of funds, we can determine the interest rate level, and that interest rate level is basically the cost of money. So thank you so much guys for watching my video. Take care, stay happy, stay blessed.